And yep, they're popping in. We'll do quick intros and then we will turn it over to you guys. All right, welcome to I just want to let you know Speaker Coach has corrected me for saying you guys. The northerner in me is very sorry. Okay, so today is Thursday, September 29th. This is MS Office Hours. I am Heather Cox, one of your co-hosts, and with me today are my awesome co-hosts.
I'm Victoria Dean.
Hey, I'm Garrett Chandler.
And I'm Andrea Sangrio.
And we are very excited to have some school data sync with us today. We'll let them introduce themselves, but we've got an overview and a roadmap. We know this is something that comes up and have some questions. I already love this design of the slide here. That's pretty dang cool. So kudos to an amazing start slide. The floor is entirely yours.
This better be the expectation for the whole presentation.
It all aligns for sure. Thank you so much, Heather, and thanks for everybody for joining in today and having us. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on what part of the world you're joining us from. My name is Bill Sluss. I work on the office education team as a PM for School Data Sync, and then I also work more broadly across the company on a lot of things that are sort of IT admin related, things like identity, security, compliance, privacy, app management, all sorts of stuff. But today we're going to be talking about SDS, and I am also joined with my colleague Vince, who can say hello as well.
Hi, my name is Vince. Like Bill said, we both work on a School Data Sync under Office EDU. Very excited to be here. When I'm not doing this, I'm working on Microsoft Graph APIs or just building out platforms. So I'm super excited to be here and share what we've been cooking up.
Excellent. And with that, so today's agenda, we're going to give sort of a high-level overview of what SDS is. We're going to talk about the new version of SDS that we're super excited about. We just launched it. It's got a bunch of new features, and following everything that it is today, we have a whole roadmap leading into this next year that we can talk about. And then at the end, we're hoping to have some time for Q&A to go over any questions that you might have about the product or anything that we cover for that matter. So with that, let's dive right in. I would say please drop questions in chat as we go, just so we have the record of them, and then Vince will try to knock out whatever questions are there, but then we can loop back and talk about them at the end. So with that, let's start with an overview. So not sure how familiar everyone is with School Data Sync, but at a super high level, it is an application that's built into every single Office 365 education tenant. It is a free application, so you don't have to pay for it, but it's entirely IT admin focused. And the sole intent of this app is basically to connect with external student information systems, get a whole bunch of data, and then do interesting things with it. And so we have two methods today to get data into the system. We can support CSV data upload, and we'll talk about that in more detail. But then we also have direct API connections for a number of student information systems that are out there on the market that leverage the one roster standard. We'll talk about that as well. But really the goal is to get that data that sits in the SIS, bring it into the tenant, bring it into our data store, and then do stuff with it. And so, as we all know, there's a whole variety of data types that sits in the SIS, depending on what your organization is and what you use it for. But the stuff that we care about, that we find most interesting and useful for the SDS product, is information about your organization, the hierarchy contained within it, the users, the user roles, all of your classes and rostering data, also academic sessions data. So understanding the context of when users are attending class and the duration of those classes and the term, semester, and school year that those things associate to. That adds a ton of value so we can track data longitudinally. And then we also just added a capability where we're bringing in and supporting demographics and flags data, and we'll talk about use cases for that. But initially, we get all of the data, we bring it in. That is the first step in the new version of SDS. And one of the unique things about the new version that's different from the old SDS, if you looked at SDS maybe 2 years ago or 5 years ago when it first launched, the new version is quite different in a lot of ways. And so I'm going to call out a bunch of those differences in this session. But First and foremost, one of the biggest changes is we really re-architected it from the ground up to build a decoupled architecture. And what I mean by that is, in the old SDS, you basically ingested data, and whatever data came into the system, we had a bunch of pre-canned ideas about what you wanted to do with it. We would automatically attempt to provision classes and groups and teams and security groups and a bunch of other stuff. We've torn it apart such that you can bring in now 100% of your data and then granularly pick and choose what you want to do with it, right? So that there's no more preconceived notions around what you might want to do, what you find interesting. You can decide what's the most valuable process to set up and use for your organization. So once we get the data in, CSV file or API, the first thing that we do is matching users. So basically, as users sit in your student information system, we have a part of our UI that requires you to tell us how we can map users that exist externally to Azure Active Directory to the users that sit inside of Azure Active Directory. And we do that through a process called identity matching. You match an attribute between the two. Once we have identities matched between the SIS and Azure Active Directory, we offer a number of capabilities around data validation and storage. So we take all of that data and we now drop it to our own internal storage for SDS. We no longer just write it forward into Azure Active Directory. We have a data lake that sits within the context of everyone's tenant. And so it sits there. That data is not accessible by any MS Graph APIs, by the end users. And so if you're concerned about bringing data into your tenant and keeping that data private, that data store is entirely private. The only thing that has access to it is our application and the UI effectively within our application. And so once the data arrives there, we do some validation. If you have any issues with the data itself, we provide out errors and warnings to let you know that perhaps data is misformatted and it can't write forward for a variety of use cases. But assuming all of your data is good, then the next step is really to decide what you want to do with it. And for that, we introduce a number of options and opportunities for you to do bulk provisioning and insights and analytics within your tenant. And so I'll just loop through these really quickly. The first one is all about creating and licensing new users. So if we find this more commonly in the K-12 space and emerging markets, but it's certainly an option for anyone. If you don't have a way to provision users today, you can leverage the new version of SDS to create and license new users directly from that student information system data. Assuming you already have that process figured out, and maybe you're running AAD Connect from on-premise Active Directory, or you have some PowerShell-based process or some other means to already provision users, totally fine. What we do in those cases where we match users is we write additional attributes onto the already existing users inside of Azure Active Directory. Things like the grade level, their school association, their user role, whether they're a student or a teacher or a professor or any of the other roles that we support. The third scenario that we support is the ability to write forward parent and guardian contact data. And this is sort of a growing space. It's pretty specific to K-12, but we bring in contact information, basic information, name, email address, and phone number for all of the students that you want to provide that data for. And we store that not as organizational contacts in Exchange, because that data is actually accessible through PowerShell queries and Graph. Instead, we write it to a hidden directory that's called Substrate. And once we get it there, we render that data out only to our first-party apps or any applications that the IT admin consents to access that data. And so again, the concept of keeping that data private was really paramount for us as we design that parent and guardian contact flow. And there's a whole variety of scenarios that are spinning up around that. Notably the new parent app that you'll find in Teams, and a few others that are coming soon that you'll hear a lot more about in coming weeks and months. The last two that I'll talk about on the bulk provisioning scenario front are all about groups and teams and groups for IT admins. So the biggest scenario and use case, why most people use School Data Sync, is that they want to deploy in bulk virtual classroom spaces, class teams effectively within their tenant. And so in much the same way that we did it in the old version of SDS, we continue to do that in the new, and directly from that student information system data, we will provision your tenant for however many classes you provide us. Basically, the system calls in a graph and writes all of that data forward, and we'll keep all of the enrollments and rosters and group memberships effectively updated over time as they change in the SIS. We also have the ability to create security groups and administrative units, things like a group per school, and we'll talk more about those. And then the last two things that I just want to touch on this slide, I know I've spent a lot of time here, but two new scenarios that a lot of folks might not know about, and these are all about enabling analytics and insights. So once you get the data into our system, the first thing that you can do is you can enable Insights Premium. And Insights Premium is an offering that you'll find within Teams that basically merges the SIS data with Teams activity data. And then we have a first-party application that reads out and provides some basic analytics about what is going on within the context of Teams, and that data is made available to school leaders. It can leverage your organizational structure to permission that data appropriately, to provide different views out to school leaders or system leaders at whatever level you have in your organization. So if you're K-12 or higher ed, that has a much more complex organizational hierarchy, it's also supported there as well. And then the third item, all about insights as well, is basically taking that same data set, and instead of using our version of insights and analytics that we provide in Teams through Insights Premium, instead you can take that data that's aggregated with the Teams activity data, and you can share that out to your own data lake. And then you can build on top of that however you see fit. Build your own analytics solutions on top of your own data lake. That is a free offering that we support through School Data Sync, assuming you already have the lake itself. So obviously any charges that come along with Azure Lake and the maintenance and anything that you build on top of it is external to SDS. But the feature to take the data, ingest it into SDS, and then export it to your lake, that is all free within the SDS product. And so that's a super high level summary. I know I went way too long on that, but that's really the context of what SDS is and does and why it's valuable. And so I'm going to roll quickly through all the rest of the slides. But as I mentioned, we do support API connections. Here's a look at 24 SISs that we have direct API integration with. This is an ever-growing list, and so basically it will continue to evolve as we move forward. We would love to add more student information systems going forward, assuming they can support the APIs that we need in order to integrate. Again, we also support the 2.1 CSV file format. It's broken down in this way. We changed this from the original version of SDS in a few specific ways that are worth calling out. I saw some higher ed folks on the call. And so we've reduced the number of required files. That was first and foremost. So you can give us just a sort of minimal data set and then optionally give us other data sets depending on what you need to do with the data. So we only require a users file, an orgs file, and a roles file. Basically tell us who your users are. And even in your orgs file, you can just state the tenant name there. It's very simplistic to get started with the system. However, I will note that we also evolved the schema of our 2.1 file to better meet the needs of higher education. One of the bits of feedback that we heard over and over again is that a lot of people thought School Data Sync is a very K-12 focused system, and really when we built it, it was. But the evolution of what we've done with the new file format, we support all sorts of user roles commonly found across the higher education landscape, things like professor or TA, all of the typical roles that you'll find in higher ed. We also support organizational structures that you find no longer just supporting a flat list of schools. We know that doesn't scale. Even for K-12, it doesn't inherently work in a lot of ways. And so now we support things like department or campus or university or research center, a whole variety of different org types that we support. And then you can layer in hierarchy on top of that to facilitate advanced provisioning scenarios. We have a whole bunch of optional data that we allow. If you want to provision groups and teams and classes, you can bring in extension attributes onto your groups in the form of course data, a whole bunch of different data types that we support. And again, yeah, the evolution for higher ed was really what drove us forward with coming out with the new format. So if you haven't seen it, definitely check it out. The 2.1 file format. It's very much standards aligned, so it's very similar to like a one roster CSV spec, but we just evolved sort of the attributes to support higher ed in a better way. So with that, really quick, new features. So we have a new dashboard in the new system. We're super excited about it. It gives you a bunch of high-level statistics and information about what data you're moving through the system at any point in time. That's something we don't have today in the old version of SDS. And we'll continue to evolve this page as it moves forward. We also provide a historical view of all of your synchronization processes. In the old version, we did not do this at all. You sort of saw what's happening at a point in time, but you never had a backwards look into what the system did maybe 5 days ago when you ran into a particular data error. And so now you can go back and look and analyze the logs and figure out what the system was doing, why you're getting certain errors in your data and things like that. It's much more helpful. You also get summary views around how long synchronization takes to run, so you can plan for future upcoming deployment scenarios. The other thing that we've done on our API connectors is we've added additional data types. And so now we're going to start supporting parents and guardians and demographics and flags data through those API connections. Previously, that was only a CSV thing. And so now if your system supports API, you'll get that. We're going to continue to support the variety of group types, but we're not going to pick and choose for you. You'll be able to decide, do I want to create M365 groups and teams? Do I just want to create security groups? Maybe I have a need for delegated administration and I only want to create administrative units. You can decide what types of groups you provision and at what scale. We'll give you a variety of filters to choose from at the grade level or the organization type level as you're going through the setup. We also allow you to pick and choose which users that you synchronize actually show up within the groups and teams as the owner or member role. So in previous version, we always assumed we had just teachers and students. The teachers were the owners, the students were the members. That didn't work for a whole bunch of reasons. And so now you can do interesting things like build out teams effectively that only have students. That's actually a quite common use case across higher education, as an example, for student-only teams. But you can pick and choose who gets which role out of the bulk provisioning scenario that you laid up. We also changed our user creation model, so we no longer ingest password data. Now instead, we make it such that you can define a password rule that leverages some of the data that you give us, and we give you some options in order to put together a string of both primary attributes, secondary attributes, some special characters, and strings to meet the needs of the new band password algorithm. So a lot of work went into making that whole piece much more safe and secure for students. And so we no longer store password data within the SDS service at all. It is entirely up to you to define the rules, how those things get set. Quick roadmap looking ahead. There's really 3 priorities for us going forward into 2023. So we just launched the new system. It is in public preview now. Our goal is to ensure that all of the features and capabilities that we had in the legacy version, which we're now referring to as SDS Classic, makes it into the new system. And so a lot of our work in the next couple of months is just to bring forward all of the features and functionality that we had, a lot of the stuff that I talked about, and that will land in the new system over the next few months. Beyond that, we want to make sure that the new UI is intuitive and it's easy to use. And so we're going to continue to gather feedback. I would love any thoughts and opinion from folks in this room and beyond, how we can make it easier to use and deploy. That's what we want to make happen. And so we definitely need your feedback there. And ultimately, we want to do that so we can empower the world to migrate from what is the classic experience over to the new. Our goal is to really set a 2-year window. In July 2024, we intend to shut down the old version, and we expect everyone to be on the new version by that point in time. So we'll make targeted investments to make it easier to transition from old to new. So be looking for that. And we'll have a new API layer for remote management, whether you're a partner or customer, you can use that as well. So that was a lot. I think that's my time. I want to open it up for Q&A. Sorry for rolling so quick. That was a lot of information. Anybody feel free to come off mute, ask. I don't know if you can pop on video, but I'm certainly fine with that.
I know there were some things in the chat. I think Vince has been trying to answer some questions that people have had. Is anybody, you guys remember, you're welcome to come off of mute. You can come and talk to us. We don't bite.
Yeah, we could start, I can start reading some of the questions. They might be in reverse order.
Go
I
for
can't
it.
tell where it started. Someone can try and find the top, but actually I'm starting in the middle because I think this is a big one. Carlos said we need deep level integration between LMS and Teams. Is SDS a step in this direction? The CSV import export is a nuance and stress ITD shops. Is there live integration? So I'm personally interested because I know there's a lot of questions around Canvas integrations and what type of version of SDS you need in that regard, and not wanting to making sure there's feature parity between V1 versus V2.1 and things like that. Probably not where Carlos is going, but any insight on Carlos's original question?
Yeah. On the LMS integration bit, we've definitely heard the feedback and certainly recognize the value of having direct API integration and synchronization from LMS over to Teams and Azure Active Directory. We have not yet locked on that priority, but we have heard from a variety of customers that they would love to see that go forward. Today, the integration is LTI based, and so you get the whole LTI model, but having full synchronization and integration is really the next step. And so it is a step that we've talked about a ton internally, haven't locked on it yet, but if it is something you would like to see happen, certainly vote it up in any and all of the feedback channels. Let all of us know, and if the stronger case we can make that customers need it and want it, the more likely it will find its way in the product, for sure. With regards to the other point on the CSV integration, I'm not sure if I grasped the full question, but I think I heard that it's painful to move data through CSV file to an extent, and perhaps is there a way to do it more seamlessly? I would say if one thing that we do have on SDS is the ability to automate CSV data uploads. We use the first-party Power Automate template in order to do that. So that's published in the gallery. It is free to use. And that template will run, it leverages the on-premise data gateway. And so if you can run just a daily export to a local storage location from your SIS, that Power Automate template and the on-premise data gateway can be leveraged to pull that data in an automated fashion on a daily or multiple times a day type basis. And so there is some automation to make it feel more like an API. It's unfortunate that we still live in the space where CSV files are the means to transport data between EdTech systems. And that's why we've really pushed for standardization of APIs. And so the more of the EdTech ecosystem that adopts standardized APIs, the easier it is for us to build sync connectors and things like that. But it is a work in progress. So there is some automation today. And if you have any ideas about how to make it easier, how we can improve, always let us know. We're happy to take the feedback.
I love
Awesome.
that you said that the feedback from the customers is really what makes it happen. We tell them that all the time. We're like, we can tell them all day long, but when customers give the feedback, that's when things actually change. So see, we're not the only people that say that. Phil has his hand up.
Yeah.
Phil, what you got?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So if we're running the classic school data sync, I'm just walking through the new one and it looks like it wants me to create a new inbound flow and everything. Am I going to mess up what I'm already syncing for this year?
You will not mess up anything. However, you're not going to be able to run both concurrently. So it will ask you to pause all of your SDS classic sync profiles while you set up the new. And so it won't delete anything, it won't change anything, but they won't be active any longer if you set up the new and attempt to do it concurrently. We recommend doing it at a break, but there's nothing that would be harmful inherently by setting up the new. And you should receive a prompt when you attempt to do it that will say something to that effect. All of your own, and it will pause them for you, basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
you'll see the prompt when you're in the manage user flow. Like after you bring in your data, it'll bring up and say, hey, we see that you're currently using classic. If you continue forward, we'll pause these for you, and it'll make sure that there's no dual writes happening. So
Where's the excitement waiting for a break?
Mhm.
Right. Living on the
Just
edge.
give it a go in the middle of the year.
Along those same lines, Stan had a question about ETA on when the new SDS will be full parity with the classic. So I guess that, I think some people might have been scarred from the 2.0 and so maybe clearing that up.
It's a great question. So our goal is to hit full parity and then make the new version generally available. So our goal is to GA. Current targets and timelines, we're looking at probably January is my best estimate. Vince, if you have anything other, you can confirm that.
Nope, Bill's right on. So that's what our goals are. We definitely want to make sure we have it, especially for people in Northern Hemisphere here in the States that just started in August, making sure that they've got time for that planning, right? So that'll give them, 8 to 9 months. And then get, anybody that wants to adopt it, in Southern Hemisphere, have it out there, but definitely for their next January as well. So, and then to be able to ask the question, I think Nathan just put in there, like, how long will Classic be available? Our goal is once we call GA, within 2 years, to be able to retire Classic. So, and then at that same time, all new features that Bill was talking about that we're going to continue adding will all be inside the new system and whatnot. So.
Wonderful. For the sake of time, I know there are questions in the chat. Bill and Vince, would it be okay if we gathered the remaining questions we may not have gotten to, just shoot them your way and maybe get some quick answers from you later? Would that work for everyone?
Yep, totally. And yeah, I don't know what the best means to share contact information, but I'm always an email away for anything at any time outside of this meeting. Feel free to reach out if you have feedback. We'd always love to hear it. So yeah, stay in touch and connect often.
Well, this group likes to provide what we laugh at as exhaustive feedback. So you're welcome to make a form and they will provide you exhaustive feedback. And we will share it. But thank you guys so much. We appreciate your time today. It was awesome to get that update. Bill, you're a fast talker like myself. If you had Speaker Coach on, it probably would have told you to slow down like it told me to.
Sure, it would have.
But no, I understand it because it's all about getting that information in. So thank you everybody for joining us today. I'll get this up on YouTube as quickly as possible. We appreciate you and hope to see you all next week. Have a great rest of the evening, everybody.